Hey there, everyone. Welcome to CTRL+ALT+DELETE with Lisa Duerre. I am your host, Lisa Duerre. And if you're here because you want to figure out how to master conflict through flexibility. That's our topic for today. I am thrilled that you are here with us today. And it's not just me you're going to be with. I have a wonderful guest to be joining us. And as everyone starts coming in the different social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, wherever you are, if you could drop a chat, what about this topic is interesting to you? Do you see the connection between flexibility and conflict resolution? I'd love for you to bring your voices in because this is an interactive experience. And I'm going to give you just a little bit of context as we get started. So, this season on CTRL+ALT+DELETE, we're focusing on firm leadership. And firm leadership stands for flexible, intuitive, resilient, and mindful. Throughout this entire season, we're doing that as a burnout prevention approach and also for high performance. Because in today's world, where no one leader can have all the answers, we have seen time and time again that those four characteristics or competencies matter for leaders. So, with that, let me give you a statistic. According to McKinsey, 25% of people believe their managers don't handle conflict well. 25% of people believe their managers don't handle conflict well. I've been reflecting on this for our episode today, and I have to say what we're seeing inside our coaching and consulting engagements in the change fatigue world that we're in tech, I think it's higher. And that's why we want to talk about this today. So here's the deal. Our guest, my dear esteemed colleague, someone who I respect, admire, I love collaborating with. Her name is Sue Trace. She's going to be here with us today. She is a renowned expert in leadership development and ADHD coaching. She's also a member of the RLD Group Collective, and I consider her a friend, a collaborator, a co-creator, and someone I can't wait to have this conversation with. And we're going to dive into actionable strategies to boost self-awareness, personal growth, and focus on conflict resolution. So don't forget, this is your podcast too. Please chime in with any questions you have, insights, or comments. And Sue, why don't you come on up and we'll get started. Hey, Sue Trace.
Hey, Lisa. So good to see you. Good to be with you.
So glad you're here. Yes. Hey, I gave the statistic, 25% of people think their managers don't handle conflict well. And I'm kind of going, yeah, I think it's higher. What are you seeing? What do you think?
Absolutely. I see it as higher as well. And, we know that effective communication and conflict resolution, it's essential in supporting employee well-being, engagement, and productivity. And when we have a lack of communication, or at least an acknowledgement of there is some simmering conflict, it can lead to feelings of disengagement, and that falls in our well-being and productivity. And it also impacts talent retention. So conflict can seriously undermine the working environment for all.
Amen. Preach it, sister. Hallelujah. Right. And so much more. When I love talking to you about this because we come at it through unique perspectives and lived experience. And I mean, I'll be the first to raise my hand and say, I haven't always handled conflict well. There's days, especially on my burnout journey, I did not have the tough conversations. There were times when I would avoid meeting rooms or hallways and walk right past other people because I didn't want to get caught in a conversation I wasn't prepared for. And over time, there's so many tools and resources that I've learned for myself that we've brought into our organization. And one of them I really believe is flexibility. And I think the thing I want to say as we start off today is the reason why I wanted specifically to talk to you about this is because of the tools that you have in your toolkit as well, especially in the ADHD coaching land, because there are so many folks inside tech who have self-diagnosed and officially diagnosed ADHD. And I think sometimes our systems are not designed to make it easy for people to be effective. So I just think we can take whatever angle, choose our own adventure, whatever the audience is saying. We already have our first chat. So let's bring, it looks like Alinka's here. Hi, Alinka. And let's see what she says, Sue, and then we're going to jump right in. So let's see, Alinka. Conflict resolution and flexibility are interconnected. Flexibility and openness, readiness to listen and understand, and also flexibility in creating options. Yes, Sue, thoughts. Thank you, Alinka.
Yes. Yes, and in order to embrace flexibility, what do we need to do? What and so the con so let me just give you an example. The Conscious Leadership Group has a location, and it's a simple black line. And the question that they pose for all leaders and all people actually, it at any given moment during your day, throughout your day, to take a check. Where am I? Am I below the line? And what's below the line? Below the line is where unhealthy conflict resides. Below the line is where inflexibility resides. We're in more of a reactive, threatened state. We're closed in our hearts, we're closed in our minds, we're closed in our bodies, and we're committed to blame and criticism. We're committed to proving we're right. Our ego identity has gotten triggered. We become defensive, and we're committed to repressing and suppressing feelings or expressing them toxically. We're committed to gossiping. And when you're below the line, you're rigid and you're inflexible. Conversely, if you're above the line, you're accessing the regions of your brain that open you up to a state of trust, curiosity, wanting and available to learn from each other, accessing our powers of empathy, curiosity, engaging in co creation and innovation, and embracing flexibility.
I love hearing you talk. Even your voice is soothing, Sue, as you're describing this. It's just really important, I think, to recognize the impact, even on how we speak or the tone in which we use to even open up to flexibility. Because if I'm coming at you like this, you're going to, but you're coming at it like this. And it's when I was talking about the examples of when I wasn't very good with conflict resolution and burning out, I was absolutely below the line. I was judgmental. I held
Mhm.
people small. I didn't believe in other people's capabilities. I felt like it was all on me. I was resentful. And I remember my first coach, one of my greatest mentors of my lifetime, used to say, Lisa, hold people big. And as I know with conscious leadership and above the line, below the line, and all the work we do and conversations worth having and appreciative inquiry and such, that holding people big really was about being flexible. It was getting out of my own way and recognizing what else was going on, which meant I had to pause, scan my thoughts, scan my body, and start to figure out, oh, yeah, I need to recalibrate before I have this important conversation or make this big decision or decide to bring two other people into a conversation where they might have conflict. So I just really appreciate that you're languaging it in a way that people can recognize it in themselves, because that's just what happened for me. So do you have a story, Sue, or an example of where flexibility has been a key component to managing conflict and resolving it, whether yourself or in a client?
I actually do. I was working with a leader who happened to have also ADHD, and um, and and their tendencies was avoidance
Avoidance.
and
Anybody else
avoidance.
avoidance? Anyone else pick that one? Because boy, that was me. Avoidance, right? That's not useful, even though it feels
Not
self-protective.
Yeah, not useful at all. Avoiding acknowledging even that the team that he was working with was even engaged in unhealthy conflict. And it took quite a bit of coaching to one day for this leader to recognize that his team was falling apart and he was at risk of losing his whole team. And there's a quote from Tony Robbins where change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. And this leader was finally ready to change. And and the first question, and so some of the questions that you can ask yourself is, as a leader, where am I? Where am I in this moment? Am I avoidant behavior and just putting my head in the sand? And or can I accept myself for being just where I am? And when we're actually scared or when we're in a threatened experience, the key to antidote to fear and to being threatened is acceptance. So giving myself radical acceptance for being where I'm at.
Mhm.
And then the critical question is, am I willing and flexible to shift? Am I willing to be with the issue from a different context? Am I willing to be with that from above the line instead of below the line? And so with this particular leader, our first steps, we're going through that. And as the leader recognized they were willing to shift, we reconnected them with their why, their vision, their mission, the values of their company and their team, along with helping them to lean into their strengths versus judging themselves for all their perceived imperfections. And this was able, through that process, we were able to energize and inspire this leader to take action and open the lines of communication with their team.
It's really inspiring, Sue. Can you double click a little bit, because you had made mention that they have ADHD as well. This leader was leading with that as just part of who they are. Is there any specific tips for all of the listeners who perhaps either are leading with ADHD in their own body, or perhaps working with someone or leading someone else? Because I think it's a nuance here we haven't brought up before, and I'd love to just presence it and learn from you.
Yeah. So in that light, the most important aspect of when you're a leader, and if you have ADHD, you may be stuck in a lot of limiting beliefs that you're carrying around, old stories, old beliefs that are keeping you small, that are keeping you from bringing your voice to the table. And so really being able to come from a values and strengths-based approach of what are the strengths that, because so many times leaders and individuals with ADHD, they focus on what they're not doing well or what others have communicated to them that they're not doing well. And so really changing that mindset. And it's really going from this fixed mindset of, I can't do this, I shouldn't do that, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough to do this, I'm afraid of being found out, shifting that to more of this growth mindset of leaning into your strengths. What are your strengths? And being able to find your voice and to separate the old stories, the old beliefs away and make a new story and embrace who you are. Being authentic and being real.
You know, I don't know. I've never taken a test to see if I have ADHD, but I can relate to everything you just said. Right? The limiting beliefs, the mindsets, and I see this in our clients as well, but just at a human level, I mean, I feel like the gift in what you just said is that can apply to all of us, wherever we are, whether we have attention deficit or not.
Yeah.
I think the thing that you just really struck for me in my heart is that we might need to all give ourselves a little bit more grace. Right? At RLD Group, we believe that strengths are the foundation, that focusing on strengths is where the magic is. And that when you know the strengths of your team, you can be more flexible leader because you can lean into each other. And you're just reminding me about the heart that's inside of each one of these humans doing their best inside the organization. And when in conflict, is your story, they suck, or what's wrong with them, or I suck, or what's wrong with me? Because either way, you're not going to get above the line if you're staying in that space. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I'm gonna bring a couple more statistics up because I want to keep this conversation going, because there's a cost to conflict, right? Especially if you're an avoider, right? So here's the deal. Managers spend 20% of their time on average managing conflict. And that's a recent HBR statistic. But if you think about 20% of your time, how valuable that is, and if you're managing team conflict that much of your day on top of all the meetings you're in, where's the time to get the work done? So I'm just thinking, what's your thoughts, Sue? And just thinking 20% of your time managing team conflict. I mean, it's here to stay. Conflict is part of work. So what are your thoughts on that?
Conflict is part of work, and it's the question of what kind of conflict do you have? Conflict is normal. Drama in teams is normal. Is it healthy conflict or is it unhealthy conflict? And if you're a manager spending 20% of your time managing unhealthy conflict, can I just say, what a time suck? What an energy suck, right? And what would it look like to take that 20% to invest in your team, invest in the team to turn the tides from unhealthy conflict to healthy conflict.
I love this.
And part of that is really being able to create an environment that's conducive to taking responsibility. When something goes on, a team member can say, I take responsibility for co-creating this outcome. That starts to generate empowerment within the team member. Building self-awareness around the difference between complaining and conscious complaining. Conscious complaining is I become self-aware of my complaining. So now when complaining is occurring, I'm aware of it. When I'm unconsciously complaining, I'm just trapped. I'm just trapped in that complaining. I'm triggered and I'm reactive.
Mm-hmm.
And another commitment, I think, that for managers to be able to start to change, to build this conducive environment of starting to build trust, right? Without trust, teams are not effective. Without trust, we have unhealthy conflict. And so I think the second commitment that leaders need to make is to be committed to be curious and learn, let go of their need to prove to be right, and be curious to open as a leader to model the to model being open, to model being curious, to model being able to ask questions of each other. And by doing so, we can embrace innovation and we can bring in flexibility within the team. I also think it's important that leaders understand that what they can do to help their teams is when teams are arguing, call that out. Hey, let's everybody just take a moment, pause for a moment, and speak inarguably. Let's separate the facts from the stories. A lot of team conflict comes from when people are talking about is highly arguable. So by taking that moment, it's going to drop everyone more energetically into more presence because all that's unarguable is here now. And so noticing that current state. And I think when teams are in drama around arguable things, they're usually operating in the past or in the future. They're out there, they're out here, but they're not right here. So really building that culture of being present in the here and now.
I want to add to that if I can, because I love talking to you. It always inspires me. So what matters most right now is a phrase I learned when I was doing some work with Dr. Danny Freeland in the exchange group. And we were doing conscious leadership and working on stress. And what matters most right now, I think, is a really great question to ask a leader. Is what matters most right now for you to be right? Is what matters most right now for you to, guide this team to alignment? Like, what matters most right now, I think, is a really great question that fits with what you're saying. And the second thing that showed up when I was listening to you is we do a lot of facilitation around burnout prevention at RLD group, and we talk about stress, right? You know this, we do this together. And one of the things that is like reframing stress, because stress might be your Olympic moment where you rise to the challenge. And stress could be like when you make sure that tape out happens or that product release or you close that deal. But sometimes stress simply means something you care about feels at risk. And if something feels at risk, you're going to go below the line because you don't feel safe, right? And so everything you're saying back to flexibility as a conflict resolution tool is if you can stay curious and recognize that it feels at risk or that something might be taken away or you might not win, that's going to help you go, oh, wait a minute, I got to get myself back up, which then for me, the question is what matters most right now. And so I'm just curious. We're in conversation. We're at a coffee shop and we're just talking, Sue, but anything you want to say to that?
And that's the power of noticing where am I at in this now moment.
Mm-hmm.
Pausing periodically throughout a day and doing a self-check-in and noticing, am I in fear about this risk? Am I worried that I'm not enough? Am I worried that am I all in the worry zone and the fear zone? And if so, shifting. Can I shift? Can I accept where I'm at now? And can I shift? So taking that moment, pausing, whether it's taking a breath, whether it's doing something to activate one of your 5 senses, whether it's just getting up and walking around your office or your room and then coming back down, shifting so that we can really access that region of our brain that will bring forth that flexibility, that will bring forth that curiosity, that openness, that empathy to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of another and understand where they're at, understand their point of view, right? And open up that dialogue of communication.
Yeah. So when you think about all of this, the engineer leaders, the tech leaders who were once engineers and are now people managers, they love a formula. Step 1, 2, 3. What are the right next steps, right? And sometimes when I'm in overwhelm and below the line, I want a checklist too. It's like, okay, just do this next thing. And we talk about pausing a lot. I do, you do, RLD group, Trace coaching. Like we all know the power of the pause. And yet, boy, do we all forget to breathe and do it. So, do you have a tip or an insight that you frequently share that we might want to just presence right here for the listener and the audience? Feel free to chime in if you've got a tip. But we say pause, and I know some days it's really hard to remember, at least for me. So, what's a tip that you give? I have a couple in mind for me too, but I'm wondering where you land on that, Sue.
So I have a couple, and when you say, sometimes it's hard to remember to pause, I think it is starting to become aware of when you are starting to feel triggered and reactive. How's that showing up for you? Is your throat starting to close? Is your heart starting to pound? Are you getting sweaty armpits? What's happening in your body that if we can start to clue into that, then could be the cue of, oh, wait a minute, where am I? I need to pause. Mm-hmm. And then I also like the 3 A's. So for a little bit of a formula here.
Here's a formula.
The 3 A's. The first is acknowledge. And that is simply, where am I? And acknowledge where I'm at. I am triggered. I am all in this state. And then allow, which is, can I accept myself for being just where I am? And allow ourselves to feel the feelings of where we're at. I am triggered. I'm reactive. I'm blaming this person, or I'm judging myself. Allow it to happen, feel it, and then be able to give myself radical acceptance of being where I'm at, and then asking myself, am I willing to shift? Do I have the flexibility in this moment to be able to shift? So acknowledge, allow, accept. The 3 A's.
You heard it first. AAA from Sue Trace. Acknowledge, allow, accept. There's been so many times I've gotten on our Zoom coaching with one of our clients and they show up red-faced or flustered or 5 minutes late and like they're right. And so I always try and help them. Like, okay, hey, let's just take a minute, right? We blither, we breathe, we do all the things. And sometimes I think that we as people, leaders, are so disconnected from our hearts and we're stuck in our heads in the logic that this acknowledge, allow, and accept could feel like a big reach for some people. And I think that's the power of coaching, because I know I've showed up with you some days and we've done this for each other too. And I think that I'm not saying you can't do it by yourself, but sometimes you need a friend, or you need a wing woman or a wingman, or you need to call a safe place to call and go, I need a 3A check-in. Can you give me a moment? Like, can you walk me through it? So I guess what I want to say is you don't have to do this alone, especially as you're building this muscle. And over time, as you age in life experience, you start to recognize, I'm showing up in a way I don't want to. Aha, right? You start to like capture that. And I love this 3 A's. I've written it down. I'm going to remember it. And I think for me, the thing that I was pondering, like, do I presence this or not, is that sometimes the way to do this is to take a timeout. And our work lives are not scheduled for a timeout or a change, right? We're like back to back and everything needs to happen. And I recall vividly as a leader in a meeting where it was just not going well. And I had to make the decision, do I call it or I just keep trying to facilitate all these people getting on the same page? But I was feeling depleted. And so in that moment, I said, hey guys, we need to take a pause. All of us like this, we need to regroup. We're going to take a time out. I know the meeting's not going the way we want it. We need to go. Let's all take 10 minutes, get a glass of water, go outside, 3 deep breaths, right? Look at a picture of your puppy. I don't care. Do something to get back centered. And there was so much magic in that because somebody owned it and took the reins and did it. And there were other times that I didn't do that because I wasn't sure how well it would be received. This is like earlier in my career. But I think it's just a reminder to me that we have more power. And sometimes when we're triggered or in conflict, we give that power away. Like there's just this like dopamine reaction. It feels good to keep fighting. It feels good to stay in it like you're already there versus just going, this is not who I am. This is not how I want to be. I'm depleted and I'm not at my best. So whatever that pause looks like, I think is more important to the engagement of the team, the trust on the team, your own mental health, the well-being of the organization. So I just appreciate the 3 A's.
And what would it look like if we added flexibility into all those team meetings and before any start of the meeting, at the beginning of the meeting, we presence. We slow everyone down. We take everyone through a presencing activity of whether it's breathing or whatever it is.
Yep.
Right? And just by doing that, will help everyone release the stress of whatever they've just brought into this meeting, right? And get everyone out of the fast doing mode and just be for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that do? We know from neuroscience that calms our brains, that gives us more clarity in our thinking, that gives us more clear-headed laser focus, and allows us to be able to innovate with each other, be flexible with each other's ideas, open communication.
Yeah.
And what would it look like if we started all meetings, if all leaders and all team leaders that were going to start a meeting began with that?
Yeah. I think it would look like a lot more connection and a lot less rework. That's what I think. At least we know that, right? Sue and I blithered before we went live, right? Like when you have that built in and you have that language and you know those tools, you can do that, right? Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you a question. This is like so in my world. And I just want to say music for me is a way to stay present. Music is a way to raise my vibration. Music is the way to go below the line, above the line. I've got playlists. We have a playlist. So when you think of conflict and all that we've talked about today, Sue, what's a song that comes to mind that might just help our music loving folks to remember to pause or, be flexible and stay curious and open? What comes to mind?
The song for me that comes to mind is Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror.
I'm looking at the man in the mirror. Oh, that one.
Making an honest assessment of oneself and one's ability to make a change. I'm starting with the man in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking him to change his ways. And no message could have been clearer. If they want to make the world a better place, just look at yourself. And it is all about really acknowledging ourselves. Where are we at?
Mm-hmm.
Where are we acknowledging our own prejudices and our failings and realizing that the only place real change can originate is within ourselves?
I couldn't think of a better song. It's stuck in my head now. It's great. Right? How many people don't? I know you know this song, everyone. I was going to sing it with you, but you were reading it so beautifully. I stopped because Lord knows my voice is not going to help make your point, but I can hear it in my heart right now. It's like, yes, this is why at RLD Group we have I, we, us. We know culture starts at the individual person. You got to connect your head and your heart. You need to be whole before your we, your team, or the us, your organization to flow. So of course this is your song. How come I didn't think about this ahead of time? This is so great. Sue, you are amazing. Okay, so let me ask you the last question. Here's my last question. And as we get ready to wrap this up, I want to just always want to leave people lighter and brighter than when they got here. So of everything we've talked about today, if you could give one closing thought that would just land the plane for someone who's like, okay, I showed up, I do have conflict. Whoa, I got to know who I am. I know the 3 A's. I got to pause, figure out how to stay open and curious. We've given them a lot of things to think about, above the line, below the line. What's a parting thought, or if you were to give some coaching wisdom as we wrap up today, what's on your heart to share?
Yeah, I think what comes up for me is if we approach each day of what's 1% more that I could do today to make today 1% better, to be able to show up as my best self and just 1%. And if each and every day we add an additional 1%, an additional 1%, look what happens at the end of a year.
Mhm.
And if we could
Yeah.
all embrace, if we could all embrace noticing where we are in the now moment, and what can I do today to make today to bring 1% more of myself for myself and my team.
1%. That's beautiful. It's like the smallest right next action. What's the 1%? Sue, always dropping such wisdom and such heart in every conversation. I am so grateful that you were here today on this episode specifically for this topic, because we know conflict is happening and we know flexibility is a way to move through that and to optimize performance and your mental health. 1%. What's 1% you can do? So with that, everyone, thank you for joining us today. Please, if this was useful to you, like, share, subscribe, bring it to a team meeting, have a discussion, presence in the beginning, and allow yourself to be human in the process. Sue Trace, thanks for being on Control-Alt-Delete with Lisa Duerre. I love you. I respect you. I admire you. And I'm so grateful for our time together.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I have so enjoyed being with you.
Thanks, everyone. Make it a great day.